Hello everyone, today I'll be talking about autism, more specifically high functioning autism. What is autism? Each state, the definition of autism varies, including the federal definition. In New Jersey, the definition for autism is a pervasive developmental disability that significantly impacts verbal and nonverbal communication and social interaction that adversely affects a student's emotional performance. Federally, autism is defined as a developmental disability significantly affecting verbal and nonverbal communication and social interaction, generally evident before the age of 3, that adversely affects a child's educational performance. When a child is diagnosed with autism, they have to have persistent deficits in 3 areas of social interaction and at least 2 deficits in 4 of the restrictive or repetitive behaviors. The social aspect is an abnormal approach to social interaction, a failure to have back and forth conversations, not showing interest in sharing their emotions or hobbies, and not initiating or responding to social interactions. The second part of that is having poor verbal and nonverbal communication, not having proper eye contact, and not showing body language or facial expressions. And the third being no interest in peers, having difficulty adjusting behavior in social interactions, and having a difficulty making friends. The 4 restrictive or repetitive behaviors are stereotyped or repetitive motor movements, use of objects or speech, difficulty adjusting to any change, interest and fixation with abnormal objects, and hyperactivity to sensory input or unusual interest in sensory aspects of the environment. There are 3 levels of severity when it comes to diagnosing autism. Level 3 is the most intense and it requires very substantial support. Level 2 requires substantial support, and level 1 is just requires any sort of support, which level 1 is mainly people with Asperger's and are very high functioning people with autism. There are very many characteristics when it comes to someone with autism. Some of these include inappropriate or minimal social interaction, self-centered topic of conversation, meaning they like to talk about things that they're interested in, if they talk about that at all, or anything going on in their lives without talking about what anyone else may be feeling or what they want to talk about. Less understanding of emotion, very monotone form of speech, and not using or understanding different forms of nonverbal communication. Like everyone, people with autism have their strengths and their weaknesses. Their strengths include many subjects in school, having good grammar skills, advanced vocabulary, being able to memorize information easily, and Kenneth Hall, author of Asperger's Syndrome, The Universe and Everything, was very good at reading. He never learned how to do it, but he claims he was born with it, and he used that to his advantage and having a reading level well above his age group. He's also very good at math. He had a GCSE math exam, which he took 6 years in advance and passed, and he was about 8 years old at the time. And he was very good at staying organized and being honest. However, he also struggled with many social interactions. He struggled with interrupting people. He would do that quite often. He struggled with being in groups, paying attention in school, being patient, and making decisions. Another difficulty with people with autism is handwriting. This has been seen in many studies, and also Kenneth Hall has attested to this in his book multiple times. When in a gen ed classroom, you may have a student or multiple students that have autism. There are multiple ways to help support them. The 3 ways is to have a routine-based classroom, so to be predictable. Have a daily routine of what's going on at this time, where to go, what to do, and if there is to be a change in this routine, to let the student or students know ahead of time so they can prepare. The second way is to teach social and emotional learning to all of the students and all the class so they could become more and more comfortable in social interactions and can help them And thirdly is to get to know the student. If you get to know the student and find out what they like, what they don't like, especially their hobbies, you could teach that to the entire class and they could feel welcomed and accepted into the classroom even though they may be different. There are many ways to get help if you are unaware of what to do with some of the students with autism in your classroom. One way is to talk to the special ed teachers in your school or district. This is something they're trained in, they've experienced it for a long time, so they are a good resource and they will know what to do. Talking to government agencies, going over IEPs and IDEA guidelines is a very helpful resource as well, as they can outline everything that is needed for the student. Talking to the parents of the student or students because they know what works for their child, so you could be able to implement that in your classroom as well. Lesson plan ideas, you can find those online on how to incorporate the student into the day-to-day routine, and websites on autism to help find out more information about autism and ways to help the student or students in your classroom. Here's my video on autism. Along with the video, here are all the sources that were used in my presentation. Thank you all.
So what is high-functioning autism? We know that autism is defined as children who have core deficits in social communication, speech and language development, as well as repetitive, restricted activities, patterns of play, for example, and stereotypies. Now, high functioning is a lot of these children can have some of these areas still being impacted, which is why we define them as autism, but they are higher functioning. They may have a normal IQ. They may have speech and language, which is really not delayed, but still atypical. For example, they can be scripting and have echolalia, but yet they are reading books at and above grade level. I have kids at 2 and 3 who are hyperlexic, who have taught themselves how to read, who may have some savant skills and be brilliant with the computers or music, for example. And these children can actually function in mainstream settings and are considered high functioning, because one presupposes that autism means you have cognitive delay or that you're not picking up on social cues. But these children may have difficulty with social cues, but they can be structured to function in a regular environment. With a little support, you can have high-functioning kids really being mainstreamed and in some areas being gifted. And they need to have the curriculum accommodated for that. Yet some of those symptoms, for example, the theory of mind, for example, picking up on what other people are thinking, or the concept of empathy, or being very concrete or literal, can be a problem for these children. So much that they are high functioning, they still have challenges and issues. Parents can be delighted that my child has learned 3 languages, or can play a piano, or can remember books verbatim, for example, or is particularly good with numbers, for example, or computer technology, etc. But they still have issues that need to be looked at. So their strengths need to be celebrated, and yet we need to continue to provide supports for areas that they have difficulty with. And I think the important thing is the social piece, because you do need social communication. And you can be high functioning academically, but I want them to be high functioning socially, making friends, picking up on social cues. What is interesting with kids with high functioning autism is that they can learn quickly. They have the cognition to understand, what do I need to do to make friends, to keep friends, to ask appropriate questions. So these children are easier to work with, and they can actually counter some of the core deficits easier than a child who's not high functioning, but they still need supports. And much that we get excited about their strengths, I really don't want you to forget the areas of difficulty that they still need support with.